Well, thank you everybody, and after that high energy performance from Tracy, we're going to try and maintain the energy levels. And what we're going to do really is to make this as interactive as possible. So would really encourage a lot of industry participation from everybody here in the room. The first way I want you to do that is to, if you haven't already logged onto the app, to please look at your little QR code here, because one of the first things we're going to do is to have a bit of a poll from the audience, and that is going to inform how we actually take this forward. So like a lot of interactive social media stories today, you guys get to direct the script a little bit. And what we'll be going to be doing, we're going to open up in a moment, we're going to have a poll, we're going to ask you what some of the barriers are that you see to investment. We're also going to have some roving mics and some online questions coming in so that you can actually share your own experience and stories. And then to help me to manage all of this and to answer all your questions, we're going to bring together some fantastic voices from the government and public sector side. So I'm really delighted to have with me here Kat Smith, who's the Senior Network Manager for the British Business Bank for the Yorkshire and Humber region, and who also has a fantastic set of experience in innovation and the combined authority, so brings a huge wealth of experience in this area. And then on my other side, I've got Tim Newns, who is one of the directors at the Office of Investment, but also has a strong career in regional development on the other side of the Pennines, where he was head of Midas for many years. So I think we've got a fantastic set of panelists to be able to really think about how we're going to unlock investment, how the private and the public sector can come together to really take forward the ideas. So first of all, we're going to start up with a poll. So if we can just show the poll, you can find the poll on the app. And what we're asking you is to give us a sense from your understanding of what is the single biggest barrier to driving forward investment in the UK. So please have a look at that. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to fill it in. And while we do that, I thought it would be really interesting to hear from the panels here about some of the work that they're doing to unlock investment and some of the techniques and approaches that they're taking. So Tim, I might start with you from Office of Investment. I know you do a lot of work to really bring strategic investment projects over the line. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I suppose we look at it in two different ways, really. One of which through a pure project-based lens and how we unlock, how we sort of reduce barriers through that specific project. And then I suppose from some of the learnings from that, and obviously our interaction more broadly with industry and the marketplace, is what the more structural things we can do more long-term to unlock those barriers sort of consistently across the piece. So in terms of projects, the biggest project I've worked on this year would be the Universal Theme Park down in Bedford, which was a very, very complex project with complexities around planning, around financing, infrastructure. Really had to be a whole of government approach, essentially, to do that. So I see one of your questions is the sort of communication between government departments. We absolutely all had to be on one page for that, and the coordination across teams, obviously with Treasury behind that, was absolutely critical. And to work to their timescales, to work on the practicalities, the commercialities for Universal and Comcast, their parent, in the timescales for them to be able to go live in the sort of 2030-31 financial year, which was the critical part. So I think what we're there to do is make sure, particularly on the very strategic projects like that we can act on behalf of Number 10 to just clear the way, essentially, and that's what they're to do. The learnings from that, though, and more broadly, particularly around capital investment, we've also established a number of things, some of which were announced in the spending review earlier this year. So we're looking at a strategic investment framework with the Merrill Strategic Authorities, which is how we actually help put more investment capability in each of those areas. I know that there is challenges around capacity and capability, and particularly some of the newer Merrill Strategic Authorities around how they build investment pipelines and take those to market. We've had the Investment Opportunities Accelerator, which we're working very closely with the TheCityUK on, looking to draw in the expertise from the City UK's members, and we're really hopeful we can look at potentially secondments, but certainly joint working in how we bring some of that expertise to bear and really double down on particular parts of the country for a period of time to bring those investment opportunities forward at pace. And then some of the other big ones are the Strategic Sites Accelerator, which was announced in the summer, a £600 million fund, where effectively we can help pump prime some of the key industrial sites in the UK to support the industrial strategy. And then finally is the Sterling 20, which was announced at the Regional Investment Summit last month, which is the bringing together of some of our biggest domestic financial institutions. And again, it's part of the work we're doing at City UK, how then we bridge that community with sort of bring demand to supply and work out what we need to do in between that in terms of the advice and expertise to sort of bring the two together at greater scale.
Well, that's fantastic, and I think that really draws on some of the points that the previous panel, and particularly Anthony, was mentioning about how do you get that greater alignment where the private sector can really help to then work alongside the public sector, maybe have the public sector de-risk a little bit, but then leave the room and have the alignment for the private funds to come in behind that. And I think some of the work we're doing together in that area should be really exciting. So Kat, from your side, I know you've done an awful lot of work really looking at innovation, looking at how you bring everyone in the ecosystem together to help to unlock investment. Could you perhaps talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mandy and Tracy have teed me up really nicely with what they were saying. I'm going to give a bit more of a localised example. So I work really closely with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. A little bit biased as I did used to work for them before I came into this role. But a big part of my role is looking at how we can collaborate with the ecosystem to break down those barriers for small businesses to access finance. And it is a complicated landscape. So I pitched an idea of an investor forum to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I don't know if it was stupidly or greatly, they decided to take me up on it. As you know, we are sat in a financial hub. And for me, it's like if we could ensure that all the ecosystem was working well together, surely that would then help small businesses because we kind of know who each other are. And amazingly, everyone, we invited over 40 to 50 financial organisations, ranging from debt to equity to angel to asset, grant providers, universities, and everyone turned up. So we actually had a problem to try and find a room big enough to fit everybody in. But what really struck me is that even though everyone was dedicated to turn up, which is amazing, we've had 2 or 3 meetings now, it's actually now chaired by a very successful exited entrepreneur. So we've really got that kind of buy-in, you know, so what do businesses need to be able to grow? And what amazed me is in that room, people didn't know what each other did. We didn't know how to get in touch with each other. So I thought, right, there kind of lies your problem. If one partner in that room can't support, where do they then signpost that business to? They didn't know. So to establish that as a group, I think it's going to be really powerful for West Yorkshire and for the wider ecosystem. York and North Yorkshire obviously are much more of a newer combined authority, but meeting with them, and it's something they want to do. They already had the idea. I'm not taking credit for their idea or anything, but it's something they're looking to do, and we've got the first meeting this Friday actually. So it's just a way that we can hopefully bring the ecosystem together. We are going to have to make sure that there's actions from it and impact. You know, it can't just be paying lip service, but ultimately I think to show that many people in a room to want to help small businesses in the region is a really powerful thing.
That's amazing, and I really like that, because I think once you actually get the people in the room, what you see is the fact that everybody can actually play a different part, and having run a few accelerators in a past life, that's what the small businesses and the tech companies want most. They want to be able to just find the right people and talk to others and learn from their experience and tap into the support that's there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that enabling role, I think, is a really critical one from the government point of view. Okay, well, we've got our poll up here, so we can actually see what people have said, and it's great to see that it's always nice that there's some differentiated outcomes here. So overall burden of regulation and lack of wider investment in infrastructure to make the projects viable seem to be the 2 biggest ones. Tim, you're nodding. Is that what you were expecting?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, certainly. I mean, as I say, on the Universal project, infrastructure was a massive part of that. You know, and not just transport infrastructure, but water, wastewater, power, obviously all of those things. I think, I mean, some of the other things on the infrastructure side, we've seen the Transport for City Regions funding that was again allocated post or around the spending review earlier in the year, where we saw some pretty generous settlements, really, I think, with the mayoral strategic authority. So I think West Yorkshire here got just over 2 billion. I think Greater Manchester, West Midlands got almost 2.5 billion each. And we had very much in mind, or government was very, very conscious in that, to ensure that there was sufficient funding in there to deliver the projects that those places want. So here, obviously, in West Yorkshire, we've got the light transit piece, which has been an ambition of the area to really create the scale of light transit for decades, ultimately. And to drive the sort of Northern Square Mile aspect of things, you need people to be able to get into the office quickly, efficiently, and from a broader part of the city region as well. That it's not just those places where transport is positive that they can access, if you like. So I think those things, putting those things in place, it unlocked one of the projects that I was working on in Birmingham, actually, which was Knighthead Capital's £3 billion investment in an area of Birmingham around a new football stadium, for example. Actually, a huge regeneration project in one of the poorest areas of Europe, so not just in the UK. But that sufficient funding, again, has unlocked a tram extension there, which has then unlocked the £3 billion.
Yeah.
And we were very, very conscious that infrastructure investment was key to unlocking, what was essentially a tenfold return on that infrastructure investment. I think that's the way that we are looking at these things at the moment, either through mechanisms like the Transport for City Regions funding or similar funds, whether it's, in Cambridge at the moment, there's a lot of work around new reservoirs, again, the first for decades. And so this government is absolutely sort of conscious that those infrastructure decisions need to be taken, and then it's just a question of financing.
Yeah.
I think the exciting thing is, how do we come up with those new financing models? And again, I go back to the work that we've been doing with TheCityUK on that. I think that's the really exciting challenge, is sitting down. And I'm part of the British Infrastructure Task Force with the Chancellor as well, and huge positivity around things like Sizewell C, and how the funding and the capital stack was developed with that, government de-risking, but also going in head-on with partners as well. And I think the more we can do that with wider infrastructure, not just power, is really interesting over the coming years.
Okay, fantastic, and very encouraging to see. Obviously, your work's doing well, because there's not a lot of blockages caused by lack of communication between government and other agencies, or from insufficient support from government. So clearly, those de-risking mechanisms are starting to come through. But I would like to make this a little bit more interactive. So a number of you obviously have completed this, and the lack of wider investment in infrastructure and the regulatory burden, as well as some of the other points that you've raised, are obviously things that you've experienced through your work. I'm wondering, is there a couple of people who'd be prepared to sort of talk about projects or particular situations which would bring some of these comments to life, and then we can really work with the panel to sort of look at how we might be able to further unblock things. So I can either take the comments on the questions on the app, but would really welcome a couple of insights from the audience, from all of you who are here on the ground, about what you've experienced. So a show of hands would be terrific, and then we have a roving mic at the back that can come and find you.
I can just quickly add to those points. I think it was something Anthony said on the first panel around businesses needing to ask for more investment. I'm going to come at this from a purely access to finance point of view. The British Business Bank absolutely loves a survey, so apologies in advance if you've had a few of those in your inbox over the years. But the biggest barrier we find is the lack of awareness, the lack of access to early stage and investment readiness, which I've kind of already touched on in my previous example. But one barrier that is really noticeable across the regions, and probably answers something Anthony mentioned in why businesses aren't asking for investment, is an aversion to taking on finance. It's a mindset. You've got a lot of family-owned businesses, particularly in the regions, particularly in Yorkshire, and they don't want to. We're bootstrappers, we've done it, this is the way we've done it, we've built our business, we're proud. We don't want to ask for finance, and if we do, we might go to our high street bank. If they say no, we'll probably just carry on anyway. So I think there's a whole mindset there, there's an education, and it's just showing it's the right finance for that business. It's not encouraging them to just take on any loan and then get into trouble, because we've seen how that works out from the pandemic. So I think that's something that really does need to be recognised, particularly in the regions, is there's a mindset here that they're not just going to run out and ask for investment because it's new to them.
Is there a kind of a sort of a literacy or sort of educational literacy element that perhaps I'm sure maybe some of the banks and the building societies are already doing, but are you helping with some of that work to give people confidence? Because as I guess Anthony and others were saying, if you don't create demand for investment, then you won't, no one can give it to you. Yeah,
absolutely. So we've actually got something called the Power of Partnerships. So that's led by us, I believe. Don't quote me on that bit, but that brings together all the high street banks and other lenders to how we can kind of educate, and then we use other organisations like the NACFB, FSB, CBI to educate their members. One of the biggest challenges we have is that people don't know who we are. They're kind of your typical SME, because we're not a direct investor, or that is changing with the upcoming spending review announcements. So it's how you get that information out. So that's where, again, my role comes in. And we do work with a lot of local partners. I work with an innovation centre in Halifax to unlock the potential there. And we do a lot with kind of female founders and diverse founders to unlock their potential and their mindset around finance. But yeah, the challenge is still reaching those more localised businesses, definitely.
Great. Is there anyone here who would like to join the conversation, either on how to get encourage companies to be willing to kind of go out? Terrific. Hey, thank you. You should have a mic coming your way.
Hi, Alex Craven. I'm from a company called the Data City. I also sit with Cat on a number of the initiatives.
I'm nervous for this question now.
To specifically lifted projects and helping scaling women-led businesses access finance. My question is really about how we get a better market for investment in the North, because there are a very small number of players for early stage and scale-up investment for seed, pre-seed, seed and Series A. The term sheets are awful. Part of the hesitation for businesses, I'm a private company, we are invested, just raise our Series A, but outside of the region, is most of the term sheets are essentially giving away your company unless you're massively successful. So it's lots of downside risk protection clauses, onerous fees, terrible valuations. There isn't enough competition in the regions between investors to get the term sheets where they need to be, which I think drives the behaviour that you've just been referring to. Why would I take investment when I'm essentially going to work for a private equity firm or a venture capital firm as an employee? That's not why I started my business. I want risk-on capital that supports me as a founder, not, oh, you can have our money, but now we run your company unless everything goes exactly to plan, which just isn't how business works.
That's to me, isn't it?
I think
it's to all this.
The first one up on this one.
Got experience.
I'm not going to comment on the term sheets, because I mean, Alex, we've had this conversation, I can't comment because that's down to like the bank's delivered partners. What I will say is there was a very big announcement this week, not the budget, guys, the 5-year strategy. The bank's 5-year strategy is finally here, and that came out on Monday. Did have to chuckle a bit about the 5-year cycle, because obviously it's the 5-year strategy, but we've never had one before. But it's only 30 pages long, so it's not too long, but a big part of that now is about how we take more risk, how we move quicker, how we're speedier, how we put more investment into the regions. Even though 84% of businesses supported by the bank are outside of London, we still need to increase that investment. I think for Yorkshire, what was Bohorst's latest report, about 3.4% or something of investment's gone into Yorkshire. We need to increase that, and the bank is really looking at how we can mobilise our systems, our processes, our investors to do so. So a big part of that is going to be working with Innovate UK, the National Wealth Fund, really aligning those government arm length bodies, and I think that was referenced on the first panel as well. So Innovate UK's appetite around risk is probably a little bit lower than ours, especially with the early stage. So working alongside them to access that and open it up. If you read it, I'm hoping you will be pleasantly surprised, because it is very positive and optimistic about how you can, or how we can, support scale-ups and move faster and de-risk those investments for both debt and equity. So hopefully, within the next 2 to 3 years, hopefully quicker, if I'm very impatient, we will see that trickling through, or should I say avalanching through. And I would say as well, I was at UKBAA Association event yesterday, held at Department in Leeds, and Innovate UK were there, and they were saying how they're going to kind of simplify their organisation, because I've worked in innovation for years and I still do not know who to go to in that organisation. So, you know, in line with kind of what they said about the American example, that it's just one organisation, one front door, Innovate UK are really going to be simplifying how you can kind of access them. And I really hope that is the case. From everything said yesterday, I was literally like, right, perfect. And the bank's also going to be operating a one front door policy. So hopefully that will A, make us more accessible, B, de-risk us, and C, we will be bringing in more investment around the innovation clusters, and the industrial strategy provides us a blueprint for that. And obviously West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire are two innovation clusters where we will be cramming investment in, and hopefully I will be playing my part in that.
And maybe, Tim, if I could just ask you, I know one of the things in terms of the private sector side of this is bringing in strategic investors, maybe family offices that are often quite interested in earlier stage tech, or maybe some of the sovereign wealth funds or other kind of venture capital companies that might come in and set up and then start to do business here. Is that something the Office of Investment has been looking at as well?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we're looking at some of the really interesting US investors and how we can sort of get them to establish a presence in the UK if they've not got one already, or to ensure that they're looking at the whole of the UK if they are here as well. That can extend from, as you say, the likes of sovereign wealth and how we're trying to channel that into very large-scale funds that will then find their way into the marketplace, or whether it's sort of more specific VCs that we know will be very positive for the marketplace here. So yeah, we are involved, but we tend to be more involved at the fund creation sort of end. Again, we work really closely with BBB on that actually, as a sort of conduit of where that money will flow through, if you like.
Yeah, because I think if you can create more demand for the projects, then people are going to fight over them. The term sheets will get better, and it will become a bit more attractive. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Thanks. Hi, it's Julian Wells from Whitecap Consulting and FinTech North. I think there's a lot to be said for investment initiatives where there's a sort of degree of seed funding by the public sector, and then the private sector kind of takes on the responsibility for growing things at pace, and that is better able to make things happen. And I think we've seen quite a lot of examples of that in this region, with some of the innovation funding over the last few years, which has helped get a few initiatives off the ground, which have then gathered momentum and in some cases gone on to become businesses in their own right. So I just wondered if anybody's got any thoughts on that kind of structure. And I don't know how well that works for infrastructure projects, but I think in terms of like mobilising the economy and getting confidence up and getting people sort of in a more positive mindset is quite helpful.
Yeah, so how do you sort of de-risk the project by having some sort of catalytic support from public funding at the front end? Yeah. Is either of you want to pick that one up?
I think it's really common already, actually, and I think there's lots and lots of initiatives. I mean, you know, we've got what we refer to within government as the puffins, the public financial institutions. National Wealth Fund obviously has a sort of ever sort of growing remit in a way. The evolution of the UK Infrastructure Bank, you know, now with much more, I think, focus on addressing market failure, and so coming in at that exact risk point and looking to de-risk projects from that. Obviously, BBB, I'll let you talk about that, but are there to do the same, and the likes of Great British Energy as well, how it's de-risking big energy projects by going in with that cornerstone funding. National Housing Bank, exactly the same as well, you know, in terms of what Homes England have been doing over the last few years, in many cases, a lot of which with Homes England has been grant in some cases, or, you know, helping to assemble land and take out some of the high-risk elements of those investment deals. And they've had lots of co-investment from, you know, the likes of PIC and L&G and all these sort of large-scale institutions, both domestic and foreign in that sense. So I think it's not a new thing for government to be doing that, but I think, yes, absolutely, particularly in the environment we're in at the moment where there is big viability gaps, particularly around development and some of those elements, then yeah, we're trying to be as entrepreneurial as we can as government, essentially, but notwithstanding the sort of pressures around value for money for the taxpayer and all the things we have to consider on that basis as well.
And I think there is something about mapping the finance stack as well, right? So, you know, after you've had that initial catalytic support from the public sector, what are the different players? You know, is it going to be venture capital, private equity, and then as you become more established, you know, maybe through banks into the pension funds or the asset managers. So understanding the different role of different players, which is where I think the building of your ecosystem, where you might start off even with an angel investor, but by the time you're actually getting through to more maturity, you have the ability to bring in different kinds of private sector capital. So I think helping businesses to understand where they sit in that trajectory and moving them through it can also be a really important part of all of this. I do have a couple of questions that have come in over here, but I see a hand up, and I'm always one for a visual prompt, so please go ahead.
Can you hear me? There we go.
Yes, please.
Chris from Blocks in New Zealand. We're just committed to launch in the UK. Just want to say, first of all, this isn't a Kiwi accent you're hearing. This is a Yorkshire accent, so in case anyone's worried. Question about capital. So obviously, you know, we're talking about more institutional capital and bringing capital into core assets that are already existing in market. There's often a reluctance from whether it's pension funds, sovereign funds, all the way into big asset managers to actually look at reallocating that capital into new innovation, because the system's kind of set up with its mandates, with its risk mitigations to kind of look at the bigger organizations that already exist that are playing in those core markets, which often limits the innovation from coming into market and creating different outcomes for customers. So one of the areas we're looking at is how do we bring that capital at scale into a market that now puts innovation at the heart of it, and that's how people can buy homes. So I just wondered from the panel, you know, what ideas, thoughts, where you can think we can unlock capital at scale, but put it into innovative solutions in the regions, rather than just put it into the tried and tested ways that it usually enters?
I mean, yeah, that's what the bank is going to be doing over the next 5 years, I would say. The spending review was very kind to us, so we'll have 25.6 billion under management, and we are really going to be looking at how we focus on those scale-ups, those innovative scale-ups in the regions. And that is a huge part of kind of, I think the government is seen as in a vehicle for growth, so like no pressure or anything, but we need to deliver on this. So a big part, I think I've referenced it before, is looking at these innovation clusters, of which there are 10. West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire are 2. Please don't ask me to name the rest because I always forget one. But they are spread across the regions, and there's already programmes of work going on around those. So there's one in Bristol and Bath. I'll use this one as an example. I hate to reference the South so much, but what my colleague has done there has been pretty amazing. So he has literally crowded in investors from London, and we always often hear that London investors don't want to come to the north, and it's not that, they just don't really know where to go in the north or where to come. They're more than happy to actually come to Bristol or where those innovative businesses are. So he's held a huge event. Over 50 investors turned up, he wanted to charter a train, but the bank deemed that too risky, which I thought was quite amusing compared to all the other things. But they've said a bus was okay, but I presume with the transport challenges that maybe a bus was deemed more sensible. And brought those investors to the businesses and just said, look, like these innovative businesses that are here, also brought members of the ecosystem so they then knew who to go to encourage those investors out of London. So I do think that's just one example that will be then coming across the regions as well. So I do a Meet the Funder series, that's typically been in York, and again it's bringing investors out of London and other areas to those regions and showcasing those innovative businesses. So on a local level, that's kind of what I'm doing, and there will be more of this coming through 100% from April onwards. That's when everything does roll out.
Well, fantastic. We've only got about 1 minute left, so I'm going to just repurpose the question a little bit and put it to Tim as well, which is, you know, where can the private sector support the work that you're doing? I think we've heard from Kat about how we can do investor meetups and engage through these kinds of fora, but from your perspective at the Office Investment, how can the private sector support your work more, and how do we form that partnership?
I think just to be hand in glove really with us. I think that's, you know, to be as integrated as possible. we work very closely with the funds at the moment. As I say, the Sterling 20 is a sort of initiative which is exactly to do that. So we've not got the market on one side and the supply end on the other, if you like, and the communications just, you know, the language is different, and the supply end's not producing the opportunities that the market needs because of risk and cost and all those different types of things. But likewise, is the market really stipulating what it needs to the supply side? And so we're trying to act in that juxtaposition, I suppose, to create more opportunities that are market ready. And I just ask people, you know, to help us on that journey, to be forward leaning, to offer their support to help us shape those opportunities in the way that they need, as you say, for the different types of fund structures that they have.
Fantastic. Well, that's a lovely note to end on. So I'm going to ask you one more piece of interactive work. On your table, you will find one of these, and it asks you to give us one idea of what more we can do to bring together the public and private sector to support investment. So please just fill it out and take it back to the stand at the front as you go out for your coffee, and that way we will make sure that all your brilliant ideas are crowdsourced and taken forward. But thank you very much for this session. Thank you for the fantastic panelists. And I think we'll just be moving shortly to a coffee break. So if you need to grab them to follow up on any conversations, you'll be able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki, Tim and Kat. I'm sure you'll agree with me, that was absolutely fantastic. We now move, as Nikki has foreshadowed, to our coffee break. There will be tea and coffee served in the Ark Royal. Please do visit our exhibitor stands. If you could be back here for 11:30, we have a fantastic session with Carol McNaughton-Nichols of Thinks Insight and Strategy, which will look at the reputation of the industry, and then a superb panel on the role of innovation and the innovation revolution. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much.